I'm Dr. Christopher Barker. I'm a New Jersey licensed clinical psychologist, and welcome to Holding Space. This is a show in which we talk about various topics of psychological interest. Sometimes it's just me, but a lot of times I have a guest, and I have a guest today. We have Sandy Gerber, who I really like your biography. It sounds like you've really been through a lot. Single motherhood, building a company in rooms that weren't designed for women like you. There are a great many rooms that were designed for women of most sorts. And I like the idea of the emotional drivers in human behavior. That is really fascinating because, I mean, that's sort of in keeping with the book that I have coming out and everything too. So why don't you tell us more about yourself instead of me doing it?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Christopher. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation. So, I'm Sandy Gerber. I'm a certified communication coach and EQ trainer. And most of my success has come from failing. So, being able to pick up again from failing and learning from those lessons. And, about 20 years ago, I was an award winning communication expert. I looked successful on paper, had the awards, the clients, the team. And yet I was failing at the most important conversations in my life, in my personal communication. I had a failed marriage, I was burnt out. So that really made me feel incongruent and I kind of felt like a fraud. And so I wasn't happy with that. I realized the pattern was me and it set me on a path for a decade to research and study everything I could on communication, emotional intelligence. And I found, some really important information and some research, which I'll get into with the drivers. And it changed my
Mhm.
life, and now it's changed thousands of people's lives. So it's really, I think, the reason I'm here on the planet. I was supposed to find that information, go through what it was, and share it with others to help.
Yeah, I believe that, when you find something that really moves you and something, we had a conversation with somebody recently about, the difference between lived experience and formal study. And I
Right.
think really most of the great theorists and most people who are really doing the important stuff are coming from a place where they're trying to either understand themselves or someone close to them. It's like, what makes this all work?
That's right.
So that sounds like your kind of motivation also.
It was. I think it was, I wanted what my parents had in their relationships. They were married 52 years. They would walk down the beach hand in hand and, they had respectful communication and it just looked easy. I didn't know that that wasn't normal. And so that's what I wanted. And that's what's always driven me is to actually have that connected conversation with the person in my life, the people in my orbit and the people that I work with. And so that was always driving me from behind. And I just my insatiable curiosity is what drove me to these crazy places that really tested my limits, being the only female executive in male-dominated industries like tech and finance and heavy equipment, doing things where I put my hand up because I was curious and I thought, "Why not? Try it, see what comes out of this." And I'm so grateful for that. So, yeah, the learnings I have got from this ride, this experience have been phenomenal, and now it's helping people, which makes me really happy.
That's great. When you talk about magnetic communication, what is that?
Sure. So I call it emotional magnetism in my book. And really, this is the research that I found from the 60s. So I had gone through all the nonfiction, all the research papers, and they were all really wonderful. But I found that they didn't help me. Like typical nonfiction, you'll read it, you'll get excited, then a couple weeks later, you forget it, right? Or you don't have it in your pocket to pull it out and use it right away. And so that practicality was always missing for me until I found this research. Now, this was research that was done in the 60s on emotional motivation. It was called the emotional appeal theory. And it was based on this book called The Magic Power of Emotional Appeal by Roy Garn. And so when I found this book, I wasn't looking for a relationship book at the time. I was looking for a sales book, essentially, something that would help me sell. And I went down that Amazon spiral one night. We've all done that. And I ended up on this book and it kind of looked really cheesy. It had a crazy cover. I ordered it anyways. And a few nights later, the kids were asleep and I opened up the book. I poured myself some wine because I thought, okay, I'll just skim this. And the next thing I know, I looked up, I hadn't touched my wine and I devoured the whole book. And that book, in it, they had done research with thousands of people to identify that there were four core emotional motivations. And this was about emotional motivation. So it's not a love language or a personality type. It's like what's fueling communication? What's underneath that behavior? What's making people want to listen and act? And so as I read it, I understood myself better. And those are the best books, right? Where you really relate to the content. And I understood why I'd made the choices I had in my life. So this information got me all fired up. What we do, and we're excited. We want to share it. I started telling people, and it was clumsy. I mean, I couldn't get it out properly. It wasn't making sense. And so my gift is discerning content. So I did. I looked at that and I thought, okay, how can I make this simpler to explain? I turned it into an acronym, SAVE, SAVE, and those were the four emotional magnets. And so this is what's magnetizing your attention. When we get all this communication coming at us, what are we actually paying attention to? So the four emotional magnets, and I'll get into them in detail with you if you'd like. These are developed as early as 6 years of age. They're based on your upbringing. They're based on the obstacles you've overcome and the season in your life that you're going through. So do you want me to jump into the four magnets with you?
Yes, please, by all
Okay,
means. I'm
perfect.
fascinated.
Awesome. Awesome. So think of yourself as as I'm going through this, your listeners also want to imagine, I'll just go through a synopsis of it, but there's full detail upside and downside in a quiz in my book. So if you're motivated by safety, if this is your magnet, you're motivated by security, by structure, by predictability, by ease. You're typically very skilled in what you do. You're usually in service to others. And your family is your top priority. You're the type of person that has a backup plan for a backup plan. So that's safety. They like structure. Then you
Mm,
have achievement people that are driven by competition and challenge and success. They're thought leaders and goal setters. Recognition, opinion, pride, really important to them. And so they'll set a goal and they'll smash it. Those are people that are driven by achievement. And then you have the people that have the value magnet. Now, these are people that are always looking at the cost benefit analysis of things, right? They're looking at they need worth and growth and significance, the return on their time and their energy and their efforts important to them. And they're looking at quality and legacy. So those are the things they're considering when anyone's talking to them. That's their filter. That's what's magnetizing their attention. And then you have experience. And experience are people that are motivated by innovation, creativity, curiosity. They are people that love change and spontaneity. They're the
mm,
ones that are creating moments and memories for the people in their life, and they're always learning and evolving. So when you think of these four magnets, you can say to yourself, when I'm making choices, what's actually behind that choice? And when I'm communicating or listening to someone, it's because they're connecting to that magnet. Like think about us driving along the road and we see a billboard, and we see another, and we don't really pay attention. But then all of a sudden, one captures our attention. It's because that message has connected to your emotional magnet. So
mm,
when we see this in our lives and we understand what our magnet is, we go from, I talk about this in my TEDx talk about labeling. We're all labelers. We tend to do that. It's how we make sense of the world. But the trouble with labeling, Christopher, is that we tend to label people by their behavior and not by their emotional motivation. So we'll say things like, you're controlling, you're a workaholic, you're boring. But what if we actually stop labeling them by their behavior and label them by their emotional motivation, what they actually emotionally need to be happy?
mm.
That's what emotional magnets do. It helps you kind of put a filter on people's behavior and understand what they need. And that gives you more empathy and more understanding and ultimately more connected conversations.
That's great. How does this manifest in like relationships? How about work relationships? I mean, that I can see so many places in life in which this would
Mhm.
be a useful sort of lens to look at things through.
Yes. I use this in personal experience as well as now thousands of people have told me that's helped save marriages and better sales and bigger businesses. But in my own personal experience, I use this in my professional life first. I thought, okay, I need sales, right? So I'm going to use this to craft my sales and marketing to connect to people's emotional magnets. So when we talk to potential clients, we ask them their needs and we can pretty quickly detect which of the four magnets they need. right? What is it that they actually need? If they're focused on price, it's value. If they're focused on what it's like to work with me, it's experience. If they're focused on who am I and what's my credibility, it's achievement. And if it's focused on safety, what processes, what structure do you have in place? Those kinds of things. So I started crafting messages. That's how my business grew so quickly. So it worked in my professional life. It's an excellent tool for sales. It's an excellent tool for leadership. I used it for my teams. I would say to them, do the quiz. And as their leader, then I knew what they emotionally needed to be engaged and invested in the company. Right. And so I would then, if someone was achievement, there's no way I was moving the performance review, that these kinds of things. So you're really aware of the projects you're putting them on, the tasks you're giving, the recognition you're giving them, all those things as a leader. And then personally, I mean, this is fun. I thought, okay, professionally, this worked. I'm going to try this on a first date with my now hot husband of 12 years.
I
So
guess it
on our
worked.
first, it works. Yeah. And he's not just now hot. He's always been hot, in my opinion. But what's interesting is that like, I thought to myself, I was a single mom for 10 years. I didn't like the dating scene. I just thought, cut to the chase. Here's the deal. This is who I am. This is what you're signing up for. I'm driven by achievement. I'm driven by experience. So that means I'm going to be setting goals, working hard, achieving things. But also, I want to have fun along the way. I want everything to be an experience. And so I asked him on the first date, what do you emotionally need to be happy? Not exactly first date banter, but it sure made for an amazing conversation. And ever since, 12 years later, we've been honoring each other's magnets. So people started seeing this success and they started saying, what are you doing, Sandy? How did this happen? From the ashes to, all this stuff, all this failure that I'd had. And even when I was a female executive in these male dominated industries, I knew what their magnets were and I would connect to them that way. Right. So it really helps you in your communication, helps you in your understanding. It helps you in your confidence to know why you're making the choices that you do. And I started writing a book about it because people wanted to know how it worked. And that book became Emotional Magnetism. Now it's won all these awards and it's all over the world and it's helping people. And it just makes me so happy that my journey of that discovery is now benefiting so many people.
That's fabulous. So if you wanted to, for instance, I mean, it seems like what you're doing is mainly trying to find the right communication style to
Mhm.
communicate with a person on based on what they need. So if
Yeah.
you were trying to assess like a person's needs on first meeting, other than a first date, how would you, you're right, that does sound like a deep conversation.
It was.
How would you go about assessing? I mean, what sorts of things would you try to?
Well, I always tell people the fastest way to make connection is to ask a question, right? Just like be curious about people. And so I found like originally I was not comfortable meeting people. I mean, now I'm a keynote speaker and a trainer and I go in front of thousands. But there was a time, Christopher, where I was not excited to walk into a room of people. I mean, I was nervous. Everyone looks so much more impressive than me. So I would go in the hide in the bathroom and wait till the speaker came out, collect my 8 cards and call that networking, right? So now after I had these magnets, I felt empowered to go and meet people that I didn't know before because now I was curious. What's their magnet? And so I was like a detective. I would ask them questions. And the trouble with networking and small talk is that people don't enjoy it because it doesn't feel sincere, right? But when you ask a really sincere question, trying to detect what someone's magnet is so that you can ultimately create connection, it's a totally different conversation and they feel it, right? So I'll say to them, instead of where do you work or what do you do? I'll say, tell me, how did you choose your profession? And they don't expect that question. They have to think about it. And because you're listening to them, they feel seen and valued and heard. And that's
Mm,
memorable, right? That's true connection. That's a connected conversation. So I say to people, you're not actually like, it's not like radar. You're not trying to figure out are you value, are you safety? But actually, it just comes out of the conversation. You can tell by their career choice. You can tell by the words they say. In my book, I go through this more in detail, but you can essentially, if you're listening to people, if you're really paying attention to that person, you can detect pretty quickly what their magnet might be. And then you just adjust your conversation so it connects to that, especially in a sales talk. But, just asking that one question, I call them honest questions, ask people in your life and new people that you're meeting a question you don't know the answer to. and not "How was your day?" Please stop saying "How was your day?" Nobody likes that question, right? We just say "Fine." My husband will come home from work, and every day I ask him a different honest question. He knows it now, right? But instead of me saying "How was your day?" "What made you smile at work today? What's going on with the team at work today? What's a fun vacation someone's having at work this day?" Like just any question you don't know the answer to that makes them think about the response. They may not have a response that's really interesting, but they're going to remember that you asked something different, right? So that's what sparks communication. And that eliminates that fear and dread of small talk.
Mhm. That's true. Gosh, I was thinking about what, answers would be to those questions. I've been asked before, like, how I got into this field, and it was just kind of a matter, okay, so you're gonna try and figure out my magnet at this point. But, basically, I was kind of like a premature adult, I guess, because I was an only child and
Okay.
really raised by just my mother. So there was a lot of sort of like quick growing up that had to happen. But I
Mhm.
also noticed that I was one of those people that all the other kids would come up to and ask me about their problems.
Oh,
So naturally, when I discovered that there was such a thing as psychology, I said, okay, well, I'm going to study that in college, and I just really never looked back. So
excellent.
what's my
Yeah. I mean,
magnet
I
then?
I would imagine that you're pretty grounded in safety, right? Because that is about serving others. It is about safety. It's about self preservation as well. And your
Mhm.
experience of your childhood, you don't want others to have that experience, right? So, or elements of that experience. So, we bring, like, all of us really have this little, you're in psychology, we have this little 5-year-old inside of us that's telling us, what our
Yes.
story is. My mom was a psychologist, and that's why I was fascinated in behavior. I remember I was 12 years old, Christopher, and I came home from school. I'd been teased by these girls at the lockers, and they were whispering and stuff. And that's big stuff at 12 years old, right? And
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember thinking, I don't know what they're saying about me. And I was so curious. I needed to know. And I went into my mom's library and I took a body language book and I read it like from front to back. And I wanted to know what they were saying non-verbally about me, right? And so I also learned a few tips along the way that I used later on. And, these are the things we pick up. Like, if that hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have been fascinated with body language. It wouldn't have continued to be a subject that I'm fascinated with. So, yeah, it's that 5-year-old in us, the little person inside of us that has a story about who we are that drives our path, until we start doing the work.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, that is an absolutely great way to begin. Looking at body language and then asking the right questions. That's
Mhm.
really important. So, what kind of wisdom do you have to share with other people in terms of like how they should handle day-to-day interactions and what's the best way to get the most out of life?
Oh, I have to say the best thing to do is to use curiosity. I mean, I really have to. It's a game changer. If you just start using more curiosity in your life about yourself and about others, you get so much out of life. Like there's times where as I said, I put up my hand and in these situations that I never thought I would do because I was curious. Okay. Someone said, who wants to do this? Okay. I put my hand up because I was curious what it would be like. So it using curiosity puts you in these situations that you typically might not have the courage to do. So that's one thing. And the second thing is it actually enables connection so much quicker, right? Like it really does. Being curious about the people in our lives. When I say, especially with relationships that are long term. So I have my TEDx talk is the secret to long term relationships. The one piece I talk about is that relationships don't just end, they drift. We stop making those everyday communication choices that we made at the beginning of the relationship, right? Ask yourself, are you curious about the person in your life's day, what they experienced in the day without saying, how was your day? And also, are you showing them that they matter, right? So get up and go and greet them at the door as soon as they come in. How many people stop doing that in their relationships? Being curious about, hey, let's try a new experience together. Ask yourself, how old are your stories? Are you
Mm.
just, are you creating new stories together? with your team, with your family, with your loved ones, with your peers. How old are your stories? Create more experiences. Be curious. What else could we do that's different? You know, because that's what keeps life exciting. And also, most importantly, be curious about yourself. Keep learning, keep being aware. You know, when I think about emotional intelligence, it has 3 stages. First, you're aware of what's happening. So when you think about emotional intelligence, I define it as your ability to notice, understand, and manage your emotions and the emotions of others. But think of it in 3 stages. First, you're aware. You're aware of what's going on in your mind before you're even speaking. Then there's
Mhm.
expressed. You're expressing yourself in a respectful way, and you're knowing what people need to hear to be heard. And then you're engaging in connection and maintaining connection, even when it's difficult. So if you think of where am I in those stages, learn more skills to be better at each of those. You'll have an incredible life.
Well, that's fabulous. I think that's really important. You talk about doing the messy personal work, and you don't talk about it from a polished distance. I know it must have been. You described basically being able to figure out what the girls were talking about at the locker, and it seems like that would be like an arc to becoming one of the popular kids and being that. But somewhere along the line, something fell apart, and you had to put it back together. So, what was that process like?
Yeah, it's messy. It's always messy. And you have all these different emotions coming in and you're feeling like an imposter in industries where you don't belong or your voice isn't being heard at the table. Many, many tears, many, many meltdowns. I talk about this in my book, Emotional Magnetism. I was in the process of applying to be and do a TEDx talk. And it was on the emotional magnets and stuff. And I was pretty confident. I was being coached and everything. I was feeling pretty confident. I got shortlisted to the finalists and I was confident that I delivered. I had rehearsed. I mean, there was paper all over our house. My husband heard so many versions of the speech. It was ridiculous. I was ready and I delivered it and I didn't get it. And I was devastated. Now I'm driven by achievement. And that was about 6 months of my life dedicated to something on the side of my work, on the side of my desk. And I failed. And so anyone that's achievement driven, to fail is really to fail. I mean, you hit rock bottom when you fail. And I did what most people do when they fail, I guess, or most women would do is I packed a bag and I went off to a retreat, right? Like I just was like, I need to get away from my life. I need to reset, right? Reset because I'm having a meltdown. And my husband's like, yeah, let me help you pack. He didn't know what to do in that situation. So there's many times where I've actually just reset. And every time I've reset, I've gone to Sedona and I've gone to Ontario and I've gone to silent retreats, but I can't recommend these enough. Whether it's even taking a day off work, you need to reset. You need to get back in touch with the voice that's in your head first and foremost, because that's the loudest and it's shouting at the point of failure where you just feel like there's no one that understands what you're going through. And it may be that you're feeling imposter, you're feeling like a loser, you're feeling like insignificant, and you can feel depressed. Like it can get really bad. So the thing to do in that situation is to read, to learn. You have to learn. And so read or listen or learn, shift, immediately shift. Don't get stuck in it. Again, ignite that curiosity. Curiosity has been my gift in my life because it has gotten me out of so many difficult situations and introduced remarkable ones. So I think the thing is in those resets, I would bring my journal. I would get all those thoughts, all that nastiness I was telling myself out on paper. I would burn the paper. I would do these rituals, shaman here and a this there, whatever, sage me, whatever you need to do, woo woo stuff. And also read academic stuff. Read from the people who have gone through this before. Learn from the people who have failed and succeeded. Then you don't feel alone. And that's the worst part of failure is you feel like you're so alone. So
Mm.
I'd say to people, it's okay to fail. Actually, it's the best thing in the world because all those things that happened have led me to this conversation that will help someone that's listening. And then that's the whole point of why we're here, right? Is to serve. So I think, answering your question is a long roundabout way, but when things have been difficult in the past, I have always taken a moment to reset my thinking and to ignite that passion to get up, brush it off, and continue on.
That's great, and that's a really powerful message, yeah. I'm planning on doing some retreats also, and I've always found that you just reach a point in your life in which you have to just say, "Okay, stop. I'm going to
Yeah.
take some time for me. I have to just go out and reset myself." And retreats are wonderful for that, and just
Mhm.
like you said, even if you just take a day and you're like, "No, this is my day." Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't have to serve anybody else right now. You come back with it fresher. You come back with more questions, you come back with more awareness, you come back with more perception of yourself. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Those are highly
Exactly.
important.
And it's also like just recently, like this isn't, and also want to emphasize, no one told me this, and I wish I had heard it, is that you're never really done, right? Like it's
Right.
always going to come back up, right? So it's not like a one and done. Recently, I went to a 10-day silent meditation course where I was not allowed to talk. And I get the irony of a communication expert not being able to talk. But it was 10 days, no reading, no writing, which was really devastating because I'm a huge reader and writer. No talking. Like it was just only voice I could hear was my own. And I did that on purpose. And you're sitting for 10 hours a day in meditation, 10 days in a row. So 100 hours of meditation. It was intense. It was very difficult. But what
Wow.
I learned from that was that I only heard myself, and I'm way more clear now having come out of it. And actually, I'm writing my next book is all about that. It's the story of what I learned because I am successful, but even then, I still didn't feel like I'd made it, because that voice is still going in my head. And I'm achievement driven. So I'm always like, what's the next thing I can do? And the next thing I can do. So I wanted to know why that's happening. And I discovered it. And ever since then, it's just been a complete game changer for me. So again, I want to share that with people. That Not many of us can shut our life down for 10 days and, stop our family life, stop our work. I closed my business for 10 days and had my husband, he was the most remarkable thing as I came back from that retreat. It wasn't a retreat, it was a course. You're like in a monastery. And basically, I came back from it and we had this beautiful conversation on our deck. He was relieved to hear what I'd gone through. And at the end, he was really happy I hadn't joined a cult, like he didn't know what was going on. And and it was a moment where, he realized it was so difficult what I did, but the answer I shared with him, and it made sense. And so I'm really thrilled. I'm sharing that in my new book coming out, connectedconversationsbook.com.
That's great. Yeah, for those of you listening, we'll have information about where you can purchase things and any links or anything that you have, give to Christine, and we'll post those also. Yeah, I can't imagine like having 10 days that I wouldn't be doing
Yeah.
something creative and just listening to myself. It's just something we're not used to. We're so go, go,
Right.
go. And, to just sit with yourself sounds really powerful.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. It's very motivating and you seem very empowered now. You seem very positive and, it speaks well for what you've learned along the way.
Well, thank you so much, Christopher. I appreciate it. I loved our conversation. It went by so quickly. And I really appreciate you opening this space for your listeners. And I hope it helps everybody. Thank you.
That is the idea. I am holding space for what people have to offer and also for what people want to learn. And if you want to come back sometime, we'll be glad to have you. After you do the next book, come back and tell
Yeah,
us how it's going.
I would love that. Thank you.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And thanks for tuning in.